It began not with a scream, but with a hiss. The gentle, electric hiss of magnetic tape unspooling into nothing. In the fall of 2023, in the quiet, sun-bleached town of Sedona, Arizona, a librarian named Maria Gable was processing a donation. A box of old paperbacks, their spines cracked with age, and a single, unmarked VHS cassette, its label a blank, black slate. Curiosity, that most human of failings, compelled her. Later that evening, after the library had closed and the world outside had gone dark, she slotted the tape into a dusty Panasonic player connected to a small CRT television. The screen bloomed to life with a torrent of grey static. She was about to eject it, to write it off as another piece of forgotten media, when she leaned closer. There was something else. Beneath the relentless hiss, a sound. Faint, rhythmic, almost melodic. A whisper. It was a voice, or perhaps many voices layered into one, speaking words that were just beyond the reach of comprehension. It sounded like a chant, or a prayer spoken backwards in a dead language. Unnerved, but intrigued, Maria used her phone to record a 30-second clip. The next morning, she uploaded it to a subreddit dedicated to unexplained sounds, titling her post simply, "Heard this on a blank tape. Anyone else hear the whisper?" And with that single click, she unlocked a door. A door that should have remained forever sealed. The internet, a beast forever hungry for novelty, seized upon the clip. It was a digital campfire story. The post garnered thousands of comments. Some called it a hoax. Others felt a primal, unexplainable dread. But a select few, armed with sophisticated audio software, saw a puzzle to be solved. A computer science student in Austin named Leo was the first to isolate and enhance the audio. He ran it through filters, stripping away the layer of static. What emerged was chillingly clear. The whisper was not a random collection of sounds. It was a phrase, repeated in a haunting, monotonous loop. 3 words. "We see you." Leo uploaded his findings, and the video went viral. It was covered by tech vloggers, true crime enthusiasts, and paranormal investigators. A challenge was born. Can you hear the whisper? Thousands of people downloaded the audio, played it through headphones, and blasted it on speakers. They reported a strange, lingering effect. After listening, they began to hear the whisper elsewhere. It was in the hum of their refrigerator, the rush of water through old pipes, the white noise of a turned-off television. The tape, it seemed, was not the source of the whisper. It was a primer, a tutorial for the human brain, teaching it to tune into a frequency that had always been there, just below the surface of perception. The phenomenon entered its second, more sinister phase. It was no longer just about hearing. It was about seeing. The human mind, a master of pattern recognition, began to find faces in the visual noise of the world. A college student named Chloe, who had listened to the enhanced audio while studying, was the first to document it. She was staring at the textured stucco of her dorm room ceiling, trying to sleep, when the random patterns began to shift. They coalesced, forming a gaunt, elongated face with dark, sunken pits for eyes and a mouth stretched into a silent scream. She filmed it, her hand trembling, and the video spread like a virus. Others reported the same phenomenon. The entity, for it was now being called an entity, appeared in the snow of a dead channel, the grain of wooden floors, the frosted surface of a shower door. It was always the same face, or a variation of it, a thing of static and shadow, peering out from the chaos. And it was learning. Its appearances grew longer, more defined. It began to move. a twitch of its head, its mouth opening and closing as if trying to form words. The whisper, now heard by thousands, had become a beacon, and the thing on the other side was now looking back. Panic began to set in. What started as a viral curiosity was now a mass psychological event. News outlets, initially dismissive, were forced to cover the whisper tape phenomenon as hospitals reported a spike in cases of acute paranoia and shared hallucinations. The online challenges stopped. The mood shifted from excitement to pure terror. The entity was no longer a passive image. It was interactive. It began to react to those who watched it. If you screamed, its silent scream would grow wider. If you cried, a black, static tear would trace a path down its cheek. And then, the final, horrifying development occurred. The entity began to reach. In a now infamous live stream, a vintage tech collector known as Retro Rick was demonstrating a collection of blank tapes, joking about the phenomenon. He held one up to the camera. See, nothing to be afraid of. In the background, his large, wall-mounted television, tuned to an unused channel, showed only static. As he laughed, a long, slender arm, composed entirely of shifting grey pixels, slid out from the center of the screen. It moved with a jerky, unnatural grace. Reaching towards him from across the room, the stream cut out. Rick was never seen again. His story was not unique. Disappearances began to be linked to the phenomenon. People would vanish from their homes, often leaving behind recording devices that captured the final, terrifying moments, the whisper growing to a deafening roar. The entity stepping fully out of the static, and then silence. The origin of the tape remains a profound mystery. The donation box was untraceable. Investigations into Maria Gable's life revealed nothing. She herself was one of the first to vanish. Her home found empty. A phone left on a kitchen table. Its memory filled with hours of video showing the entity's face slowly filling the screen. Governments issued statements attributing the events to mass hysteria, a form of auditory and visual pareidolia amplified by social media. But the official explanations rang hollow to those who had seen, to those who had heard. The world adapted, as it always does. Static shielding, a form of soundproofing combined with visual white noise generators, became a multi-million-dollar industry. People learned to avoid prolonged silence, to shun dark screens. The world became a noisier, brighter place in a desperate attempt to drown out the whisper. But in the quiet moments, in the space between wakefulness and sleep, or in the sudden hush when the power fails, people still hear it. They try to ignore the shapes that dance in the corners of their vision. The phenomenon never ended. It simply became a part of the world, a dark frequency humming just beneath the surface of modern life. The door that Maria Gable opened could not be closed. It remains ajar, and from the crack, the whisper continues an eternal, chilling promise to a world that learned, too late, that some doors should never be opened. We see you. In the months that followed what became known as the unsilencing, a fragile, terrified normalcy descended. The world lived in a state of managed paranoia. Noise life, a term coined for the constant broadcast of benign audio and visual static into living spaces, became as essential as running water or electricity. Companies marketed sanctuary fields, high-frequency sound emitters and layered light projectors designed to create an impenetrable buffer against the ambient noise where the entity lurked. But the phenomenon, a living idea given form, was not so easily caged. It began to adapt. The first sign was the echo taint. Individuals who had been heavily exposed to the original whisper started reporting a new, more invasive phenomenon. They would hear the whisper not from external static, but from internal sources, the rush of blood in their own ears, the rhythm of their own heartbeat. It was as if the signal had bypassed their ears and was now being broadcast directly into their neural pathways. A support group for the afflicted formed on encrypted servers. Their testimonies were uniform. The whisper was no longer saying, "We see you." It had changed. It now whispered, "We are you." This was no longer an external entity peering in. It was a parasite merging with its host. Then came the reflections. Dr. Reese Thorne, a disgraced neurologist who had become leading, if unofficial, expert on the phenomenon, published a controversial paper. He proposed that the entity did not have a single form, but instead used the brain's own architecture as a canvas. It began appearing to people not as the generic static face, but as doppelgangers. A woman in Seattle saw it wearing her own face, but with eyes blacker than a starless night, staring back from her polished granite kitchen countertop. A man in Florida saw his own reflection in a window wink at him. Moments before the glass itself seemed to soften and a hand that was his, yet wasn't, tried to grasp his wrist. These were not mere hallucinations. They left physical traces. The woman in Seattle found her granite countertop cold to the touch for days, a chill that no amount of sunlight could dispel. The man in Florida had finger-shaped bruises on his arm, dark and icy. The entity was learning to personalize its horror, using a person's own identity as the ultimate weapon of psychological terror. It was breaking the final barrier between the self and the other. As the scientific community floundered, subcultures emerged from the terror. The most disturbing were the whisper cults. These were groups of people, often from the fringes of society, who had not just accepted the phenomenon, but worshipped it. They saw the static, as they called it, as a form of divine revelation, a higher consciousness breaking into a flawed reality. They would gather in abandoned buildings, surrounding themselves with banks of old CRT televisions, all tuned to dead channels, actively seeking communion with the entity. Their rituals involved synchronized chanting, attempting to harmonize with the whisper, disturbing footage, allegedly leaked from one such gathering, showed dozens of cultists, their eyes glazed over, chanting as one. As their chant reached a crescendo, the static on the screens behind them synchronized, and the entity appeared on every screen simultaneously. But this time, it did not reach out, it simply smiled. And then, every person in the room, in perfect unison, spoke a single, clear sentence with a voice that was not their own. "The signal is clearing. Prepare the gate." The footage then cuts to static. The cult was found days later, deceased by their own hands, a final, horrific act of devotion. They had not been killed. They had been used as mouthpieces and then discarded, the most compelling and terrifying. Theory came from an anonymous source within a 3-letter agency, a source who would only communicate via text-to-speech software. This source claimed that the VHS tape was not the cause, but a symptom. They theorized that humanity, through its ever-increasing creation of digital and analog noise, had inadvertently been broadcasting a psychic frequency for decades. We filled the world with radio waves, television signals, and internet data, a constant, chaotic scream into the void. The whisper tape, they suggested, was not a key that unlocked our perception, but a response. Something from the outside had finally found a way to modulate our own noise, to use our own broadcast as a carrier wave for its own signal. The entity wasn't breaking in. It was speaking back on a channel we had built ourselves. The source's final, chilling message before going permanently offline was, "You don't need to find the source of the whisper. You are the source. It is simply the echo, and it has learned to talk." So, where does that leave us? There is no victory to be had. No monster to slay. The story of the Whisper tape is not a story with an ending. It is an ongoing, silent war fought in the living rooms and minds of billions. We continue to broadcast our noisy lives, a necessary defense that is also, perhaps, a continuous invitation. We live in the world we remade, a world of permanent light and sound, terrified of the silence we once craved. The original tape is lost, or perhaps it was never the point. The signal is self-sustaining now, a part of our global ecosystem. We scan the static, not out of curiosity anymore, but out of a desperate vigilance. We listen to the hum of our appliances, the patter of rain, the rustle of leaves, forever waiting for the whisper to change again, to give a new, unthinkable command. The door is open. The house is full of noise, and we can only hope that the things now walking through the static are content to just watch and whisper and wait.